as a figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, impossibly tall. Her limbs too long, joints bending at wrong angles. Her spine curved backward in an impossible arc. Her skin was gray and slick, stretched too tight over jutting bones. Her face was mostly shadow, but her mouth hung open in that terrible, endless scream. The sound came from somewhere deep inside her. Hey there, night listeners. Welcome to Dark Noises Stories. I'm here to let you hear your fears and have a relaxing night while you do. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time are you listening to us? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you want more immersive, scary stories like these two here. Now, turn off the lights and let the sound guide you into the dark. I never used to believe in my family's rules. They sounded ridiculous. The kind of ghost stories parents use to keep their kids inside when the fog gets too thick. But every Halloween in our house outside Salem, Massachusetts, we followed them religiously. We were told they were for our safety. My mother would say it with such gravity, her eyes holding that distant look that suggested she'd seen something she could never quite forget. 3 simple rules. Never open the door after midnight. Keep the fire burning until dawn. And never look out the window if you hear screaming. I used to roll my eyes when I was younger. But this year, I learned why those rules existed. It was the first Halloween since I'd moved back home after college. For years of university, studying engineering and embracing skepticism, I'd come back with a degree and the confidence that I'd outgrown my family's superstitions. The town was drenched in rain that evening, the kind of cold October drizzle that clings to your skin like a second layer, seeping through jackets and settling into your bones. The smell of wet leaves, mixed with wood smoke drifting from chimneys, creating that distinctly autumn atmosphere. Our old family house sat on the edge of the forest, about 2 miles from Salem's historic district. Far enough to feel isolated, but close enough to see civilization when you needed it. The house was built in the 1780s, with thick plaster walls, uneven floors that creaked with every step, and windows made of old glass that distorted the view. On clear nights, you could see the faint glow of town lights between the trees. On nights like this, when clouds pressed low and mist rose from the forest floor, it was just darkness. Pure, complete darkness that swallowed everything beyond our porch. The rain was steady, creating a soft, rhythmic pulse against the windows. Each drop seemed deliberate, like fingers drumming against the glass. Inside, the fire crackled in the stone fireplace, filling the living room with orange warmth. The wood popped and hissed as pockets of sap caught flame, sending up small showers of sparks. My sister Emily had gone to Boston for the weekend, leaving just me and my best friend Brian in the house. Brian had driven up from Boston for the weekend. He was loud, sarcastic, and always skeptical of anything that couldn't be explained by science. We'd known each other since freshman year of college. "Man, your family really leans into the whole Salem witchcraft vibe," he laughed, tossing his jacket over a chair. His hair was still damp from the dash to the porch. "You actually do this every year?" I nodded, poking at the logs with the old iron poker. "My mom's side has done it for generations, ever since something happened back in the 1800s. I set the poker aside. "There's a journal somewhere, written by my great-grandmother, but my mom keeps it locked away." He raised an eyebrow, dropping onto the couch. "Let me guess. Witches, curses, spooky forest ghosts. Something like that," I said, though my tone came out flatter than I intended. Because deep down, I remembered the night I was 8 years old, the first time I heard the screaming. I'd been sleeping when the sound woke me, high-pitched and piercing, making my teeth hurt, and the way my mother's face drained of color when she burst into my room. She'd grabbed my hand before I could reach the window. "Don't look outside," she'd whispered, her voice shaking. "Never look outside when you hear that sound." By 9 in the evening, the storm had thickened. The wind howled through the trees with increasing violence, making them sway and creak, their bare branches scraping like skeletal fingers. The rain slammed harder against the old glass. We'd ordered pizza earlier and watched horror movies on my laptop. We'd joked about my ancestral ghost babysitter, as Brian called it. When the clock struck 11, its chimes echoing through the house, I stood and moved to the fireplace. I stoked the fire, adding 2 more logs, making sure they caught properly. The logs were oak, dried all summer, and they burned hot and steady. My parents weren't home. They'd gone to visit my aunt in Maine. That meant it was my job to keep the rules. Brian smirked from the couch. "You're really not going to sleep tonight, huh?" "Not till sunrise," I said. "That's how it works. Someone has to stay awake and keep the fire going." He grinned, taking a sip of his beer. "Man, your family's weird. No offense, none taken. Just don't mess with the fire, okay? And don't open the door. No matter what." He saluted sarcastically. Scout's honor. Outside, the thunder rumbled, deep and rolling and distant. The house gave a soft creak with every gust of wind, its old bones settling and shifting. Around midnight, the power flickered. Once, twice, then the lights went out completely. Only the fire crackling and the rain against the glass filled the sudden silence. I grabbed a flashlight and sighed. Perfect timing. Brian was grinning. "All right, this is officially a Halloween cliché. Power out, creepy old house, weird rules. I love it." I didn't laugh. I moved to the fireplace, adding another log, wanting the light stronger. The flames leaped up, casting wild shadows. Then, at exactly 12:03, someone knocked at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed through the hallway. Each one measured, patient. I froze, every muscle going rigid. My throat went dry. Brian looked at me, his grin fading. "Dude, are you expecting someone?" I shook my head. "No." The knocks came again. 3 more heavy impacts that shook the door in its frame. Brian stood up and started walking toward the front hall. "Don't," I said sharply. "No one opens the door after midnight." He turned, caught between amusement and confusion. "Come on, man. It's probably some kid pulling a prank." "No," I said louder. "I'm serious, Brian. It's the first rule." But he laughed and sidestepped around me, reaching for the door handle. I lunged forward, grabbing his wrist, just as his fingers touched the iron handle. He looked at me, startled. "Please," I said, my voice tight. "Please don't open it." He hesitated, seeing something in my face that made him pause. We stood there for a long moment, frozen. Then the knocking came again. 3 more heavy impacts, louder, more insistent. Brian slowly pulled his hand back, stepping away from the door. The knocking continued for another minute, then stopped abruptly. Silence fell, broken only by the rain and the fire. Before I could feel relieved, I heard something else, a scream, high-pitched and piercing, like someone in terrible pain. It started low and distant, then rose in pitch and volume, becoming a shriek that made the windows vibrate. My blood turned to ice. Brian's face went pale. "What the hell is that?" "Close the curtains," I whispered. "Close all of them now." He didn't argue. He moved quickly to the windows and drew the heavy curtains shut. I rushed to help him, pulling curtains closed throughout the house. The screaming continued, rising and falling in waves. Sometimes it sounded human, sometimes like wind through broken metal, sometimes like something that had never been human. It was wrong on every level. I grabbed the poker and threw more wood on the fire, forcing it higher. The room flickered with heat and light. The screaming grew clearer, drifting from the woods outside. The same sound I'd heard when I was 8. That high, piercing shriek that made your bones ache. Brian tried to steady himself. "That's just the wind, right?" But I shook my head. "The wind doesn't scream like that." Hours crawled by. The storm kept raging. The screaming would fade, then return, always from a different direction, as if circling the house. I made sure the fire never dimmed, feeding it log after log. Brian sat tensely on the couch, his confidence completely gone. Around 2:30 in the morning, Brian stood up abruptly. "I can't take this anymore," he said, his voice tight. "I need to see what's out there." "Don't," I said immediately. "That's the 3rd rule." He ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. There has to be a rational explanation. Brian, please, trust me on this." He shook his head and walked straight to the window, reaching for the curtain. I moved fast, but not fast enough. Brian pulled the curtain aside, just a few inches. For a fraction of a second, he saw something. His eyes widened in absolute horror, his face draining of all color. His mouth opened in a silent scream. I grabbed him and yanked him away hard, pulling him backward. We both stumbled, and then Brian screamed. A real scream. Pure, primal terror. Something wet and warm was running down the side of his face. I dragged him toward the firelight and saw it clearly. A cut, small but deep, running from just below his left eyebrow down toward his cheekbone. The eye he'd used to look outside. Blood streamed down his face, dark in the firelight. "Don't move," I whispered urgently. "Stay here. Stay in the light." The screaming outside intensified, right at that window, becoming so loud it vibrated through the walls. Then came the sound of something moving across the porch. Slow, scraping movements. I pressed a towel to Brian's face, trying to stop the bleeding. He was shaking violently, his eyes wide and unfocused. Then came a new sound, something tapping the window glass. 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 taps, deliberate and patient. I kept myself between Brian and the window. The tapping stopped. For a long, heavy minute, nothing happened. Then the fire suddenly flared, flames roaring upward. Something hissed in the darkness. The air became thick and heavy. It smelled of sulfur and rot. Brian's voice came out as barely a whisper. I saw her face, her eyes. They were, ... Double quotes. He couldn't finish. His whole body shuddered. "Don't think about it," I said quietly. "Just focus on staying here. She's still out there, isn't she?" I nodded. "She doesn't leave until sunrise." The rest of the night passed in tense silence. Brian sat against the wall, the towel pressed to his face. The bleeding had slowed, but the cut remained angry and red. He didn't speak much, but I could see him processing what he'd seen. The screaming would come and go, sometimes distant, sometimes so close it seemed right outside the walls. I watched the clock ticking above the mantel. 4:45 in the morning, a little over an hour until dawn. Then I looked at the fire and my stomach dropped. The flames were dying. The logs had burned down to glowing embers. I reached for another log from the box. The box was empty. Panic surged through my chest. There was more wood on the porch, but that meant opening the door. Brian saw my face and understood. "Don't even think about it," he said hoarsely. "Let it die if it has to." But as the flames guttered lower, the room grew darker and colder. The shadows crept closer, becoming thicker, more solid. And then the screaming started again. This time, it was inside the house. We both heard it clearly. That high, piercing shriek coming from the hallway that led to the kitchen. Brian's eyes went wide. "No, it's inside." It got inside. The screaming grew louder, closer. Then came the sound of bare feet dragging on the old wood floor. We both backed toward the fireplace as a figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, impossibly tall. Her limbs too long, joints bending at wrong angles. Her spine curved backward in an impossible arc. Her skin was gray and slick, stretched too tight over jutting bones. Her face was mostly shadow, but her mouth hung open in that terrible, endless scream. The sound came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere not quite in this world. Brian screamed back, pressing himself against the wall. She turned her head sharply toward him, and the screaming intensified, becoming so loud I felt it in my chest. I could see his cut bleeding again, fresh blood running down his face. I grabbed Brian and pulled him toward the fireplace. I threw in anything I could find, a magazine, a photo frame, a wooden box, anything that would burn. The fire caught, sputtered, then roared back to life. Light exploded through the room. She recoiled, her form breaking apart like smoke, dissipating into the shadows. The screaming faded. We kept the fire burning with whatever we could find. Books, newspapers, a small chair, anything to make it to dawn. Brian sat huddled by the fireplace, one hand pressed to the cut on his face, but he'd stopped shaking. Something in him had changed. The skepticism was gone, burned away by what he'd seen. When the clock finally struck 6, the storm had faded to a drizzle. The screaming had stopped completely. The first pale light of dawn touched the windows. Brian finally spoke, his voice quiet and rough. "I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. From the beginning. It's okay," I said. "You didn't know." I know now. He touched the cut on his face, wincing. This is going to scar, isn't it? I nodded. Probably. When full daylight came, I stood and walked to the door. I opened it slowly. The porch was soaked. Rain dripped from the roof. But there, pressed deep into the wet boards, were footprints, bare, thin, with too many toes. Each print was pressed so deep it had splintered the wood. They led away from the door and vanished at the edge of the trees. Brian came to stand beside me, looking down at the footprints. He was quiet for a long moment. Every Halloween, he finally asked. Every Halloween, I confirmed. He nodded slowly, touching the cut on his face. Then I'll be here, every year. You shouldn't have to do this alone. I looked at him, surprised. You'd come back after this. Someone has to help you keep watch. Someone has to help you keep the fire burning. His voice was serious now, all trace of sarcasm gone. I saw what's out there. I know what you're up against now. And I'm not going to let you face it alone. He extended his hand. I promise. Every Halloween, I'll be here. I shook his hand, feeling something shift between us. A bond forged in terror and firelight. That was 3 years ago. Brian has kept his promise. Every Halloween, he drives up from Boston. We sit by the fire together, keeping watch through the night. He doesn't joke about it anymore. He understands now. The scar near his eye serves as a permanent reminder of the night he broke the third rule. A thin white line that he tells people came from a hiking accident. But we both know the truth. I haven't broken the rules since that night. Every Halloween, I stay home. I keep the fire burning. I don't look outside. Because I know what waits in the woods beyond our house. What screams when the night grows to still. And every year, when the wind picks up and the rain starts to fall, I hear her again. That high, piercing shriek, circling the house, testing the windows, waiting for someone to forget.